Bayo Rotimi joins us now. He's a market analyst. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
Well, yes, the capital market probe is ongoing with the House of Representatives, and they intend to find out the near collapse of this market. And hopefully, at the end of the day, we expect to see maybe the market just picking up and such that investor confidence will not jump out of the window. But from what you've seen going on with this probe, it will always have its effect on the market. How would you analyze that?
Well, I think my view is you probably have to go back to the origins. How did we get to where we are today? Okay. What mistakes were made? Where are we today? And also, how do we move forward? So I will expect that this probe will focus on substantive issues. I think that in the capital markets, a lot of mistakes were made. Mistakes were made by the regulators. Mistakes were made by the operators in the market. And I think it is time we learned from those mistakes and then move forward.
But they have to highlight what those mistakes were.
Essentially, absolutely. About 3 years ago, a group of stakeholders in the capital markets came together. A committee was set up under the chairmanship of Dr. Sulaiman, essentially to look at the entire market from inception to where we were in 2008, and also to try and chart a course for the future. And that was an industry-wide initiative. And the results and the recommendations are in the public domain. If you go to the SEC websites, it is there. So we all know why we got to where we are. And it is really about the faithful implementation of the recommendation. So I would feel that any initiative to resuscitate the market should have started from there. So our honorable members should really probably have picked up that document, looked at that document, because that is the blueprint. Everybody came together. We were very, very honest and factual about how we got to where we are. We apportioned blames to where blames should be apportioned. And that was an intention to move forward.
Looks like you were part of that particular move or committee of the Bayo Sulaiman.
I was. A lot of the operators in the market were nominated to the committee. So my firm at the time was also a member of that committee, and we made contributions to that effort.
In other words, as of 2008, you guys saw the handwritings on the wall that there were some kind of imminent danger coming towards the capital market.
Okay. I'm sorry to cut you. As at 2008, right, the tail end of 2008, and this committee submitted its report in 2009. So we were already in the tailspin, right? So the markets were collapsing all over the world. And we now felt, unfortunately, I don't think Nigeria reacted as quickly enough. We saw what was happening in the global markets. We saw what was happening to oil prices. And we knew we have a monoproduct economy. So it was a matter of time for this thing to hit us. But a lot of our regulators, the CBN at the time, felt Nigeria was relatively immune to what was happening all over the world.
Remember that, yeah.
Yes, and because of that, our response time was slow. But notwithstanding, after the crisis hit, we all sat down as a committee, as a group of stakeholders to review and come up with strategies. Now, that was a painstaking effort, and like I said, the recommendations are there for everybody. And to be fair to some of the regulators, the implementation has started. And I think really we just need to go back to that document and continue with that implementation.
So when you guys met, I mean, during this meeting, there was no talk of finding, you just said blames were apportioned. So it was a matter, was it a truth and reconciliation committee? Was that what it was about? In other words, there was nobody being found culpable and saying, okay, extra steps will have to be taken. Some people made scapegoats up so that, that kind of thing doesn't happen again.
Certainly. Well, as a matter of fact, as soon as the committee submitted its report and made certain recommendations, the operators of the capital markets actually took steps. So for the first time in a long time, a lot of operators were sanctioned by the SEC. Even the Nigerian Stock Exchange took a lot of stockbrokers to task. Anybody that was seen to have violated the rights and the privileges of investors, people who we felt did not discharge their professional obligations responsibly, they were brought to task. There is an investment and securities tribunal where erring capital markets operators will be arraigned and tried. You know, the Nigerian Stock Exchange has its own mechanism for disciplining stockbrokers. So a lot of people, a lot of firms actually lost their licenses. So, but I believe it is an ongoing process, and it's something we just have to faithfully implement, and also have the National Assembly support the capital market with legislation. And that's really where we are.
This probe is good. I mean, every way, there can only be good coming out from it.
Well, I would say the jury is still out. I think it's always good to examine what happened, especially when we're talking about a market where a lot of people lost a lot of money.
Sorry, following the probe, are we doing that?
I'm sorry?
Following the probe,
yeah.
Live on television, are we doing that? Are we on track?
Well, I think it's good for Nigerians to see what is happening. It is probably, you're right, it is a platform for most Nigerians to get to know what happened, what the impact of certain decisions that were taken by government officials, by regulators, and how it impacted on them, right? But my view is we have to find a way of bringing those recommendations, and I'm hopeful that as the probe continues and as stakeholders are coming up, somebody will actually go and rehash this document and put it out in the public domain, and then we have a scorecard to say, these were the recommendations, this is how far we have gotten, and so on and so forth.
And confidence on, when you talk about the recommendations, perhaps you open up the window and tell us some of those recommendations, and perhaps see if the probe panel can as well have a copy of that.
Well, just to answer the last question first, the document is available on the website of the Securities and Exchange Commission. It has been for the last 3 years, you know, and I believe that the stakeholders, especially the members of the probe panel, can actually access that document. But one of the things the document sought to do was to, first of all, restructure our capital markets. One of the things we saw quite clearly was that there was typically a conflict between fiscal policy and monetary policy of government. You have a government that is expansionary, right? The Minister of Finance, superintending the economy, is spending a lot of money. You have a cost of governance that is through the roof. Then on the flip side, you have a CBN who, in order to curb inflation, is actually trying to pull money out of circulation. So because of that, CBN is offering and borrowing money at 15 or 16%, right? So what that means is if government is borrowing, and government is supposed to be a risk-free borrower, right, then you are crowding out the private sector. They have no access to finance because everybody will lend to government because, number one, I will get a higher rate of return than I will get in the capital markets. Number two, it is secure because government is deemed to be risk-free. So we saw a lot of inconsistencies in government policy, and we said as part of the recommendations there should be greater symmetry. We said there should be greater coordination amongst the various regulators in the capital markets. Prior to that time, you will have the central bank moving in one direction, the stock exchange in a different direction, the SEC in a different direction. So one of the recommendations of the committee was that there should be a coordinating group where all the stakeholders, all the regulators sit down and we are singing essentially from the same hymn sheet. And there are about 25 recommendations, and it is a public document.
How would that group how would it have been formed? Who will be the members? From SEC, CBN, they all come together and make sure this happens?
Yes, it is called the Financial Services Regulatory Coordination Committee or something, and it has membership drawn from the SEC, the CBN, PENCOM, the Stock Exchange, and I'm sure the Economic Management Team of the government.
For the avoidance of doubt, is this group going to be maybe for this probe, would any member of the group be present in the National Assembly to make the submission?
Well, I think they have been called in at different times.
Okay.
The SEC has been called in. I'm sure the Stock Exchange has been there. I'm sure the Director General of PENCOM has been invited at some point or the other. You know, but one of the objectives of the committee was just to ensure there was greater regulatory coordination, right? Then, like I said, there were about 25 recommendations, and I would want to believe that a good number of them have been implemented to date. There are still some that require a change of legislation, which we're still, hopefully, the National Assembly will speed up.
Okay, so my colleague was asking earlier if you think that what the probe has set out to do is actually beginning to accomplish with the line of questioning that you're seeing, following it live on television.
Okay, I think to a large extent it has, as long as it is a public probe and it is being broadcast to all Nigerians, then if for nothing else, there will be some level of investor education coming out of that. People can start to see why we got to the sorry pass that we got to, and people can start to see the steps and the initiatives that are being taken. People will start to see that if people have infringed on the rules, they will actually get sanctioned for it. So to that extent, I think it is good, but I think that we need to focus on substance. We need to focus on how to move the market forward, because the reasons why we got to where we got to, I think is fairly obvious, and it has been rehashed so many times. So it is time to really say, where do we move, how do we move forward from where we are? And that is really what I believe the committee or the probe should be focused on. It should really be futuristic.
Okay, this tribunal, what kind of confidence do investors have in it? I mean, how do they approach that tribunal to seek justice, if you will?
Okay, are you talking about the Investment and Securities Tribunal?
Yes.
Yes, well, it is an entity that was created by law, the Investment and Securities Act. It is actually equivalent to the Federal High Court. So the chairman of the IST is equivalent to a judge in the Federal High Court. So the law of the land backs that tribunal. So any decision that is taken, any judgment that is passed at that tribunal is equivalent to that passed by a judge in the Federal High Court. And if you have any dispute with that judgment, then you go to the Federal Court of Appeal. So it is a court of competent jurisdiction. It can sanction even the SEC. It can sanction the stock exchange. It can sanction operators.
In other words, if shareholders felt hard done by, they could approach this tribunal and seek redress.
Absolutely. There are a lot of litigation before the tribunal today initiated by shareholders.
What about the speed of administration of justice? Is it quick, slow, or normal judiciary way?
Well, because this is almost like a special court, it can actually and does actually move faster than the traditional Federal High Court, which is bogged down by lengthy delays. So I believe, and again, it's probably about resources, it's about capacity, but I think that the IST moves pretty fast, but it can certainly improve in terms of its turnaround of adjudicating and passing judgment.
Away from the global financial crisis, which then we thought we were immune to, what about practices by operators as well as those who were supposed to watch the backs of investors?
Thank you very much. I think it has been widely acknowledged that there was laxity on the part of the operators regulating the market at the time. I think it has also been widely...
At the time?
Yes, because in the run-up to 2008, investors were exposed to a lot of sharp practices. Investors with limited education about the market, they were being offered scenarios that were not realistic. People were essentially selling to investors the singular argument that prices only move in one direction, and that was up. So a lot of people ran into the market, borrowed and mortgaged everything they had, simply because people said to them, this is the quickest way to make money. Now, yes, there is a responsibility on the part of the investor, but there is also a responsibility on the part of the operator in the capital market who is expected to give qualitative advice. So I think on both sides, a lot of people made a lot of mistakes. The regulators were not fully on top of what was going on, and there were a lot of sharp practices. That was why everybody, all of the stakeholders had to sit down together and say, how did we get this thing wrong, and how do we move on from here? And that's the situation.
One of the concerns of legislators is that the capital market hasn't come back as fast as other markets around the world. Do you share this view?
I do indeed. The global crisis started in late 2007 into 2008, and most stock markets across the world have started to show signs of recovery. The Nigerian capital markets, unfortunately, has not shown any consistency. It's actually been extremely volatile over the last 4 years. So you see a short period of gains followed by a longer period of losses. Now, I think the reason for all of this is, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of policy, right, starting from the government and the economic management team down to the CBN and all of that, we need to have consistency. Investor confidence is at an all-time low, and the only thing that will rebuild that confidence is when the government and the functionaries of government and the regulators and parastatals all come together and are showing cohesion. They are showing a clear sense of direction, so that is what will engender confidence. But if I hear the Ministry of Finance saying, I will spend 4 trillion naira, and I hear the CBN institute policies to pull that same money out of circulation, and they are supposed to both be members of the same economic management team. So I ask myself, are they talking to each other? Are they listening to each other? Those are the things that need to be addressed. I think those are the bigger issues. Once we sort out the bigger issues at the macroeconomic level, it will trickle down. Confidence will be restored. Even foreign investors, yes, they constitute a large part of the market, but a lot of them are still waiting to come into Nigeria, because Nigeria has tremendous opportunities, upside opportunities for them. But they are waiting to see a bit more structure.
But how are you going to go about this? Because policy flip-flop is one thing that we've seen several times, gives everyone almost a lot of headache. How will this committee approach this? Because, I mean, you always will have this pop-up.
Yes. I think that all of the stakeholders have to bring, like they say, their A game to the table, right? Government, we cannot continue to excuse government and say because they have been consistently inconsistent that should continue. I think we need to put a higher level of demand on our public officials to say, do your part and let the private sector do theirs. All we are asking for nowadays is government should create a platform, a foundation, an environment, and allow private enterprise to drive.
That's the political support you talk about.
Yes, that is the political support. So what I want to see is all the coordinating units, all the various policy apparatus, let them be speaking in the same voice. And I think in the capital markets, we've come together as a body. There is something called the Capital Markets Committee, again, that has membership drawn from all of the stakeholders. So we're starting to see a consistency in what is coming from the capital markets. So we, as a group, are now putting pressure on the executive to say, this is what we need to get our market resuscitated, because all other economies of the world, other capital markets in the world have picked up. We are still slow. So there is a bit of pressure on government, and I believe the National Assembly should actually join this effort in putting pressure on the executive to ensure that the policies that come out of there are supportive of the capital markets.
That's very important, because now you say foreign investors are waiting to see what happens. How much of foreign investment do we have in a capital market?
As at the last time I checked, easily about 75 to 80% of the trades that happen on the Nigerian Stock Exchange are driven by foreign investors. You know, which is a bit of an irony, because it looks as if the foreign investors even have more confidence in our markets than Nigerians themselves. You know, so what it means is that we need to bring Nigerians to the table, Nigerian institutionals. We have the pension commission, or the pension fund industry, that is sitting on 2.5 trillion naira worth of cash. This is cash that can be invested partly in the capital markets, partly in infrastructure. That could be a form of kickstarting our economy. But, yeah.
Considering all that has happened in the capital market, if someone hears that their pension fund is going to be going there, don't you think they're going to develop cold feet?
Thank you. You know, when the Pension Reform Act was promulgated and the industry kickstarted, a lot of participants in the capital markets were saying, oh, a lot of the cash that has been collected, contributed, should be invested in the capital markets. But PENCOM, in its wisdom, put a limit and said you cannot invest in excess of 20 or 25% in capital markets instruments simply because of this volatility. So I recognize that. But we are moving to an era now where there is greater disclosure, there is greater discipline on the part of operators and even companies in the capital markets. We have a financial reporting standard now, which is universal. So unlike before, when companies could play around with their figures, it is near impossible to do that now because the reporting requirements are of such high standards, right? There is greater oversight, and I believe the National Assembly can also play an added role in here. There should be greater oversight of all the players in the market. So as long as people know that the rules exist, there will be sanctions for breaches of those rules, then people can respect the rules and play by the rules. Now, once we have that scenario, the capital markets is not a short-term market. And unfortunately, most people that have invested in the capital markets have been looking for short-term gains.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't exist. If you want short-term gains, play in the money market.
Well, some of them were told that they can.
That's the problem. So again, lack of investor education. Again, fraudulent practices by some operators. So that is why I'm saying the solution has to be holistic. And we must hold everybody accountable. So my view, going back to your point, is the capital market still remains a viable investment outlet, as long as those who are investing have the required skills to assess, analyze the type of investment they are making. And the pension fund administrators have that capacity. PENCOM, their oversight on their operators is excellent. So what we need now is people to put long-term funds into long-term investment, which is really what the capital market is.
What other sectors are we looking to come do that? If PENCOM, for instance, and some others are already there, which other sector of our economy hasn't come to the listing?
Yeah, well, a number of companies, and there's been a lot of debate recently about getting more companies to be listed on the stock exchange. The Nigerian Stock Exchange is 52 years old as a market, and we have less than 260 companies listed on it. That is abysmal. So what we need to do is to encourage more companies to list. But before those companies will list, you need to create or give them an adequate incentive. They need to see the benefits of listing their stock on the markets. So the stock exchange, I know under the new management, is aggressively trying to encourage companies to come and list. Once we start to see more companies listing, once we start to see increased sophistication in our markets and we're introducing additional multiple instruments and asset classes, then you have a situation where the market is getting a lot more robust and then more investors can come in. There are still a lot of foreign investors waiting to come in. There are still a lot of local institutions waiting to invest. We have lots of fund managers, and they are also waiting to put money into this market.
What would you say to those who just wonder, saying if all of this procedure, the laws, regulation are in place, how come we hear what we hear with PENCOM? Because I see here that the tribunal is empowered by virtue of Section 93 of the Pension Reform Act 2004 to adjudicate over actions challenging the decision of the Pension Commission.
Right. Now, the reality is this, and I think this is a challenge that we have faced in this country. There are no shortage of laws, there are no shortage of regulations and rules. Where we have always slipped up is the implementation part of it. You know, the problem of Nigeria, I say this everywhere, the problem of Nigeria is very simple, because over the last 50 years, a lot of intelligent Nigerians have sat down and proffered solutions. But it is that implementation that is the problem. So what we need to do is to ensure that the regulators are sufficiently empowered by legislation to be able to carry out and sanction erring participants. They are sufficiently empowered in terms of the quality and the capacity of people that work within the regulatory bodies, because capacity building is critical. A lot of the reason why we are in the mess we are in today, pardon my language, is because there was a shocking lack of capacity across the board. The people that were operators giving advice to investors did not know, they did not have the full complement of knowledge.
Does that also include overpricing?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You know, there, apart from the lack of knowledge, you know, there were also people who sought to deliberately manipulate the market. And that is why what we had ultimately was a bubble, because people were pushing prices over and beyond the true value. And it was only a matter of time for that bubble to burst, which is exactly what happened. But a lot of us learned lessons. A lot of people lost a lot of money. And I am hopeful that on account of that loss, you know, we will, going forward, not repeat those same mistakes.
How much of publicity does this tribunal give to some landmark decisions? Because they've taken a whole lot of them here, what we see, because this could help investors' confidence.
Certainly. Certainly. I think, like I said, once the tribunal, as well as the committee and other stakeholders in the market, as long as we are focused on the big picture of moving the market forward, I think all of the attention, all of the focus should be on how do we move forward. We spend too much time on postmortems. We already have documented all the things that went wrong in the past, so we know them. What we should sit down and collectively do is, these are a series of initiatives to move the market forward. What is required in terms of executive support, legislative support, judicial support, administrative support to get this thing up the ground?
We cannot afford to play politics with this.
We cannot.
We has to move the economy forward.
We cannot.
Considering the friction, just an addition to your question, Chamberlain, the friction in the sector. I mean, you always see that most times it seems the financial sector, or players in the financial sector, never get along, or most times don't get along with members of the National Assembly for whatever reason. Do you think the support would definitely come from the legislature?
Well, I would like to appeal, you know, to the legislators, the National Assembly. I think we need, in the capital markets, we need to see ourselves as partners. The capital markets in any country, in any economy all over the world, is an integral part of the economy. It is a tremendous source of capital formation, right? So it means that as long as we do not have a vibrant capital market in Nigeria, the national economy is worse off for it. So if there is an overriding interest to move the economy forward, then the National Assembly, the executive, and all the stakeholders have to collectively align with that vision. It's time to rise above pettiness and let us focus on what is required to move the nation forward.
Well, shareholders have a lot to play here, but you've given a lot of insight into this matter. But let's get to Abuja. Sonny Wosu, the of Independent Shareholders Association of Nigeria, is there at this moment. Morning, and thank you for joining us. Are you optimistic now that we have this probe going on, we will eventually get out of where we are and begin to move forward?
Well, Chamberlain, good morning to you. The issue clearly is not a matter of probe. You had Rotimi analyzing it properly. The issue is policy somersault. When it favors them, the decision, the opinion from the probe findings, and when it pleases them, they will go ahead and do things contrary to the expectation of shareholders. The fact again is that we should bear in mind that our market is an emerging market. And therefore, in an emerging market, with a bidding system of 5% up or down, definitely, sometimes it will be difficult to say the prices are manipulated, because the law says it will not go more than the 5% allowed at any bidding day. So that has been the major thing concerning the issue of pricing on our shares.
All right, comment on this, if you will. There are those who believe that shareholders are usually aware of most of these transactions when they happen, and as such, they cannot feign ignorance when some of these things go wrong, because that's part of the transaction. Sometimes you win some, and sometimes you lose some. That's part of the transaction. Sometimes you win some, and sometimes you lose some.
Well, Chamberlain, the issue is most of the very serious shareholders are people who actually invested for the future. They are not people that invested on short-term basis. The big boys destroyed the money market and came up to the capital market and eventually destroyed the capital market with short-term investment, and they were all favored with the bidding system, which means that if they are lucky with the brokers who connive with them, they can push a price by about 25% or thereabout in 1 week, increasing the value of their shares. And as soon as they achieve as much monumental profit they want, they check out and dump the shares. But the serious shareholders are people that invested for the future, who sees the capital market as a long-term investment, who will not dare bother to borrow money to play in the market because they are actually looking forward to a retirement, and a retirement that will give them value with their investment in the capital market.
Well, Mr. Wonsu, saving for the future is very, very important here, and everyone has been so worried about this. How come your group, your body, didn't see this coming to the extent that we are in this whole dilemma?
Yeah, Suleiman, I'll just let you know that I have a chronicle of actions which Independent Shareholders Association took when we saw that things were going wrong with the market. I'd like to let you know that in October 2006, we had to abort the AGM of Afribank in Port Harcourt because we suspected there was two voices that were pointing to the account. One said the account was cooked, the other one said the account was correct. And we went to the AGM and did all we could, even at the detriment of my life, because I was attacked there, and stopped the AGM. The following 2 weeks or 3 weeks, this same AGM was taken to Benin, and there in Benin, an armored vehicle was stationed, whereby they were looking for me and the others who opposed the AGM. And I have a chronicle of so many things that we have done, by even going to court to challenge the falsification of the transaction on AP, which of course led to the removal of the then president of Nigerian Stock Exchange, Alhaji Aliko Dangote. And we also have a situation where we took Wema to court because they were faulting corporate governance for Odua Investment to have less than 10% of the holding of Wema Bank, trying to impose 5 directors, and so many other things. These were things, and we have evidence. We spent a lot of our own money from the little earning from shares to fight this issue. We have evidences on this, which could be made available to you on request. So we have been going through this. And also, do not forget that in the banks, it's only the central bank who sees the audited account and approves the account before it gets to the shareholders. So there is no way shareholders will be able to know what was happening in the financial sector without the approval of CBN. But what gladdened my mind so much is the acceptance of guilt by CBN, and that gives room to anybody who may wish to go to court to challenge the destruction of our investment in this country, alluding it to the regulators.
Future, a differentiation should be made between short-term investors and long-term investors. Should there be rules guiding how long you can actually, or how the minimum amount of time you can actually have funds invested in the capital market?
Well, the issue is that it's a level playing ground. It's a private thing. It's a capitalist field. Then it's actually it's left to the regulators to give a guideline as to how the game should be played. The capital market itself need not to force anybody to remain in the market. All I'm saying is that the regulators must be watchful, because a lot of questionable monies can come through the capital market, thereby making the big boys to play on a short-term basis and destroying the market as we have witnessed. That's the point I'm making. Otherwise, it's a free market, it's an emerging market, it's a capitalist field. It is not meant for non-capitalists. So that's the point I'm making. But regulation could assist the platform to understand the kind of money that comes into the capital market. But as I said at the beginning, the capital market, the genuine shareholders are people that play there for retirement period and will not borrow money to do.
Okay, so in this respect, you will not exactly support regulation that, you know, determines maybe for how the minimum time that people can stay in the capital market. The minimum time that people can stay in the capital market.
No. I will not support that, because if I have to support that, I would have been asked to leave the capital market after 43 years in practice. So I will not support that. It is a personal decision of investors to go to the capital market. So it should not be teleguided, but the fact of the case is that there must be regulation guiding the field of play as far as the capital market is concerned. Let us also ensure that whoever defaults on the regulation must be penalized to tell others and to increase the confidence in the market, because that has been the major problem, that we have so many rules guiding. Some rules favors the big boys, and some rules is at disadvantage of those professional shareholders who want to remain in the market. So we want to see a situation where the laws that guide the capital market will play equity on both players. Whether you are a big boy or you are a small boy, there must be one rule to guide us.
Well, it's so obvious that there is an issue of class in this whole practice. Are you hopeful that the probe will give at least the small boys some kind of reprieve?
Well, the probe should come out with a level playing ground. Once the probe comes out with that, I mean, it's left for anybody to graduate from small boy to a big boy. It doesn't really bother me. But what really matters to me is that a level playing ground should be assured to the people, so that the confidence of the investors will further be assured on the market.
Let me ask Mr. Rotimi this, Mr. Nwosu, just a minute. Does this tribunal have respect of persons? Because he says there that there's small boys, there's big boys. What's going on?
Well, I believe that there should be only one set of rules. The law should not distinguish between a small boy, in quotes, and a big boy. I think that everybody should play by the same rules. I think that if there are any infractions or infringements of the rules, then the law of the land should take its course. I think generally in Nigeria, there is a belief that certain people can get away with breaching and breaking the law, while other people who may not have the financial capacity will suffer for it.
Yeah, did this committee talk about this in any way, with a view to addressing it?
Well, the position of the committee that looked at the capital markets in 2009 was that there had to be a supremacy of the rules. There had to be no distinction between individual participants in the market. So the committee and all of the efforts that have been embarked upon since then has always had the consistency that we apply the law to its letter and to everybody equally.
Okay, let's get back to you, Mr. Nwosu. Now that you say that the CBN made some admissions, are you expecting some other regulatory agencies or bodies, if you will, to make similar admissions with a view to perhaps assuaging frayed nerves, maybe punitive measures taken also?
Chamberlain, the problem about Nigerians and the bigmanity that is applicable to them is that nobody cares to say, I am sorry about the shortcomings from my organization. And that is why, for not coming out publicly to say, I am sorry, nobody is perfect. We further endear people to exploit how to be compensated about the destruction of our investment, since we are not the cause. I want to quickly say one thing. Now, all of us are very much aware that demand and supply is the rule of the market. And in the process, if a price stock is pulled down through demand and supply, and we are seeing it very clearly that there is continued to be an operation, running operation in buying and supply in that stock, I think my understanding of the capital market with my experience there will not link such fault on anybody. I will take it very clearly that an investment itself is a risk. But where we have people that are supposed to give us some kind of comfort with regulation, destroying the market. Take, for instance, when the central bank governor came, he was speaking 7 days a week and he was refuting everything he says. And we went to him and told him that the issue of banking and capital market is not a matter of newspaper every day. And that further threatened the market. And that was a deliberate thing, threatening the market in a way that everybody tried to put on helmet to take cover. Let me see what I can recoup from my investment and get out of this market. Our market cannot be described to be too bad because we are players there. It's not meant for everybody. And you also understand that using a language, kalu and all this and that, casino, and further destroy the market. We should face the fact and say the truth about this issue. The SEC itself brought in an interim administration that remained interim permanently. And all this will tell the world that we are not serious about the whole thing. How can you bring an interim is a temporary thing and it remains permanent there? The stockbrokers who owns the platform cannot appoint their own president and ensure confidence to the investors. Now, again, these same these same stockbrokers were the ones who helped to ruin so many investors by telling them wrong things about the market. And like Rotimi said, he was damn right that some people sold their investment, estate and all this and that, because everybody is looking for money and they will want to rely on those who are licensed to play in the market with information. Unknowingly to them, some of the information turned out to be fake information. Now, these same people are being considered for what they call, there's an English, they call it, to give them SECO on, after deceiving the people, you are now asking the government to use taxpayers' money to support you. You know, all these are things. When shares was going on, central bank held the shareholders over a year before they announced their allocation in the name of verification. And in the process, the big boys were selling their shares. By the time they finished the verification, announced the allotment, you see that prices will fall. So we have been enjoying policy somersault in this country, which is not helping or has not helped even the country and Nigerians.
Well, having
the investment platform, I want to repeat, is a capitalist place. If you are not capable of being a capitalist, you have no business going to play there. So the message is very clear. This market was deliberately destroyed by government agencies that call themselves regulators and some of overzealous stockbrokers who at that time was so extravagant, and now they are trying to get saving grace from the government. I miss the language. If I remember the language, forbearance. Yes, they are now talking about forbearance. Forbearance on what? If you have deceived shareholders to buy stock that ended up deepening and punching off their pockets, and you have taken your consideration, why are you talking about forbearance? These are things that doesn't give us confidence in the market. But
you
I
talked about
to appeal to shareholders that is the only route we know that will give us a better retirement. Therefore, we must continue to see how we rescue the market.
You use strong adjectives there, saying it was deliberately destroyed. Well, perhaps it remains to be seen, or who knows what will be their verdicts or recommendation at the end of this capital market probe. But from what you've seen, the submissions that have been made and the direction they seem to be going, are you optimistic that perhaps at the end of the day, it will assuage frayed nerves and corrections made?
Assuage nerves, let's see how it goes. Who are you assuaging their nerves? Is it the shareholders? Some are dead now, who were advised to play in the market, and they played, dealt, also took their life. Whom are you going to give that benefit? The issue is that life must continue. Today, all that I will advise those that lost money in the capital market, they should take advantage of the poor pricing in the market and get an average that will reduce their pains as to the amount of money they bought. Of course, we are also aware that there is no money in place today, but they have to bear with it. Now, the market is not over until it's over. I believe very clearly that smart ones who are dedicated shareholders will continue to buy shares at the lower price. And of course, until the regime of the present governor of central bank ends or he is removed, this economy will not come up. So that's the situation. And we are not happy that even the president is not saying anything other than to be following the script which is given to him. So the fact remains that definitely the probe will turn in a report. It is left for the operators to see the report as something that will help the capital market to get back to an appreciable level. Otherwise, it will also end up in the archive, and sometimes you may ask for it like the windfall probe. We'll be looking for it. We'll not even know where they kept the report. And as a result of that, it will then be a wasteful exercise to those that sat down to prepare this report. Because if you go through the probe very clearly, you cannot hold anything. So they are actually making it a theoretical exercise that has no effect on the practical effect of what happened.
All right, Mr.
You see, central bank will come and
we're really out of time on this one.
How does that help the market?
Thank you for coming on, Sonny.
Day before yesterday, I was there. They were talking tales. And I advised the probe panel, invite the former managing directors of these banks and let us know what happened before the appointment of CBN management that further destroyed the market. What do you expect? Do you expect any shareholder will want to help or buy such an investor? When SEC itself, who is supposed to protect shareholders, is serving on the board of AMCON. When SEC
the committee has got 2 more weeks.
The advice to give to shareholders, hold town hall meetings and all this and that, they are not doing it. And our investment in the 3 banks become a toilet paper.
Shareholders Association of Nigeria. Thank you for coming on this morning. All right, let's get back to the studio here. You got a question from Mr.
Yes, quickly. Before we leave now, Mr. Nwosu is definitely very angry at the manner in which the crisis was handled. And he feels that it's one of the reasons why confidence hasn't come back to the market. Do you share his point of view?
I agree with certain aspects of what Sir Nwosu has said. I believe that certainly a lot of people did a lot of things wrongly. He talked about operators in the capital markets, the stockbrokers, and other players. He talked about regulators. But I believe that for us to move forward in a constructive manner, one of the things we must recognize is what did everybody do wrong? right? And I don't think it should be shifting blames. I think we should recognize that even investors themselves, right, they also made their own fair share
Yeah, but
of
even in the
mistakes.
process of correcting it,
Yeah.
I mean, should we still be asking what we're doing wrong in the process of correcting what we thought was already, something that was going haywire?
Very good. And I have to go back to what I said earlier, that everybody got things wrong. We all made mistakes. We need to own up to those mistakes. We have a consensus of a blueprint, a framework for how to move the market forward. I think what is critical is faithful implementation of that.